Third graders, welcome back to the Colonial America Domain 10 from CKLA. You're learning about the colonies of America, the New England colonies, yay! Okay, so we are in lesson 8, the middle colonies today. Alrighty, let's get started by shrinking my head. There we go. Sounds funny. Alrighty, here we go. Here's a bunch of words for you to remember. Commercial, concentrated, that one's independence, diverse, occupation, money, reclaimed, and ultimately, alrighty. Here is the timeline of colonies that we've talked about and some that we haven't. There we go. I'm going to be talking about New York and the Dutch today. So here we go. The English have now successfully established a number of colonies in North America. They were determined to claim more land, which is why in 1664, a fleet of English warships settled into New Amsterdam Harbor, which is now the New York Harbor in New York City. England promptly claimed the harbor as its own. England has a problem doing that, I know. Anyway, while they were at it, the English claimed the city and all the land around it too. Seriously, it's like people coming into your neighborhood, coming to your house and saying, "This is my house now, get out." It doesn't make sense, but that's what they did. There you go. This was a particularly bold move, right? It was particularly bold because these areas were already Dutch colonies, but Native Americans were living there as well. How and why did this happen? Let's go back in time and find out. This area was once named after the capital city, Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. The adjective Dutch is used to refer to people from the Netherlands. Alrighty. Oh, like I'm in England. Okay. I'm like Asia, but that's right. In 1609, Henry Hudson, an Englishman exploring from the Netherlands, set sail across the Atlantic Ocean on behalf of the Dutch East India Company. His destination was North America. Hudson, like many explorers of his time, was searching for a northwestern water route to Asia, or what they called the Northwest Passage. Although Hudson did not find that route, he did find an area that is now part of the greater New York City area. When he arrived in this harbor, Hudson claimed it for the Netherlands. The harbor area was named New Amsterdam, and the colony was named New Netherlands. Hudson did, however, name the Hudson River after himself, and so a Dutch colony in North America was established. We learned more about the Henry Hudson and other explorers in the European Explorers Unit. Which brings up an interesting question about how the settlers came in. It's really only in modern, last several hundred years, where that was considered offensive, that you just come in and take other people's land. All of the ancient civilizations before that, Babylon, Rome, Greece, Persia, everybody, all these other Egyptians, they came into places, took over the territory, and took it as their own. But really in only the last couple hundred years, where we came to North America and took over the Native American, kicked the Native Americans out, now the Dutch, we started doing that. It's considered inhumane to do that. It's wrong to take other people's land, to not pay for it, to take what's not your possession. It's interesting how that works, but we're not going to dive into that whole societal thing. Let's get back to the story. Before long, this Dutch colony began to develop as an important fur trading center. Beaver fur was very popular in Europe, and Henry Hudson had noted that there was an abundance in the area. It is believed by many historians in 1624, Peter Minuit, the governor of the Dutch colony, purchased the island of Manhattan from a group of Native Americans known as the Munsee in exchange for trade goods worthy of 60 guilders at that time. A guilder was a unit of Dutch money, and 60 guilders was very little compared to the value of the land of Manhattan today, because Native Americans did not share the Europeans' concept of private land ownership, because they believed the land didn't belong to them. It was given to them for a season, unlike the Europeans, who just take land. Okay. The historians, because of that, are not sure whether the Native Americans understood what the Dutch were doing, that they were purchasing the land, nor are historians sure the Dutch realized that the custom of Native Americans to negotiate for trade goods in return for allowing others to pass through or temporarily inhabit land upon which the natives were settled. So they didn't The natives did not realize we were going to be here permanently. Rather than create boundaries between Native Americans and colonists, these exchanges were meant to be a basis for continuing social connections between the groups. So it seems likely that both parties misunderstood the nature of the exchange. As a result, conflicts arose and continued between the colonists and Native Americans in this region, just as they had in other regions. As the Dutch colony continued to expand, it began to attract more Europeans. The colony allowed for certain religious freedom, so people who were not very happy with the leaders of their churches began to leave their homes and arrive in the New World. This colony had an excellent land for farming and growing fur trade. The English had set their sights on this area too. For quite some time, they had concentrated or focused on establishing colonies to the north and south of what is now New York. But in 1664, they turned their attention to this area. At this time, in England, Charles II was king. His father, Charles I, had been killed because he was not well liked by the people. Charles II had been forced to leave England. Later in 1660, Charles II was invited to return and become king. If you remember, King Charles II had acquired or built up a great deal of debt. This happened during the 10 years that he had been living in exile. During this time, Charles II had borrowed an enormous amount of money from his friends. It was not easy to live like a king when you are not actually recognized as one. When Charles II reclaimed his throne, he looked to North America to solve his debt problems. As you know, he had already given land that did not belong to him in the south to several of his loyal friends. You might ask, why didn't he give away parts of England? Well, because that was against English law. There was no such law in place to protect the land in North America, and Charles believed he was entitled to claim this land. Charles II based this belief on the fact that John Cabot had explored North America and England back in the late 1400s, well before Henry Hudson had done so for the Dutch in 1600s. So, yeah, a little bit of time passed there. King Charles II put his brother James in charge of coming up with a plan to take New Netherlands from the Dutch. In 1664, James, also known as the Duke of York, sent a number of warships to New Amsterdam harbor. The Dutch had been taken by surprise. Not only was the New Amsterdam poorly defended, but the townspeople did not particularly like this overbearing governor at the time, Peter Stuyvesant. They were unwilling to risk their lives for him against the English, so Peter Stuyvesant had no choice but to surrender. It's like the people didn't like the governor very much, so they just gave the land away to England. Like, we like England better than you, sorry. Anyway, I always think it's funny when I say the Duke of York. Sometimes I misspeak and call him the Dork of York, which that's not right. You're going to remember that now. So the Duke of York, not the Dork of York, had carried out this mission without firing a single shot. King Charles II was very pleased indeed. Although the Dutch did try to take their colony back several times, they were ultimately unsuccessful. By 1669, an area officially deemed as the English colony. In honor of the Duke of York, New Amsterdam became known as New York City, and New Netherlands was now the colony of New York. Not wanting to be greedy and ever grateful to loyal supporters of the monarchy, the Duke of York gave the southern part of the colony of New York to two of his friends. These friends were George Carteret and John Berkeley. This area later became known as New Jersey, named after the Isle of Jersey in the English Channel. A lot of things are named after stuff in England. Soon after, the English took an area known as Delaware away from the Dutch too. So the English had now established colonies in three distinct regions: the southern colonies, which were made up of Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina, and Georgia, and the New England colonies made up of Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and the middle colonies made up of New York, New Jersey, and soon-to-be Pennsylvania and Delaware, which we'll talk about Pennsylvania later. The population in the middle colonies grew rapidly. These colonies attracted not only English people, but people from other European countries too. In fact, the population in all of the English colonies grew, and within 100 years after King Charles II reclaimed his throne, the population would grow to be 2 million. Two of the most populous cities in North America at this time were located in the Middle Atlantic region, New York and Philadelphia. These cities grew into bustling commercial centers with large populations, which means that there a lot of things were sold there, just like commercials on TV, getting you to try to buy stuff. That's what they were. People who moved to the middle colonies from another country brought with them their own individual languages, cultures, and range of skills. The people who settled in the middle colonies were particularly diverse or varied. You can imagine hundreds of new arrivals speaking different languages, wearing different kinds of clothing, building different types of homes, and eating many different types of food. Despite their differences, however, the people who moved to North America all had one thing in common. They wanted a better life. They wanted hope. There were also many different reasons people chose to come to the middle colonies. One was that this region had good harbor areas and long, wide rivers. The English knew that this region would be good for trade. Another reason some people were drawn to the middle colonies was that people in charge of governing these colonies were generally tolerant of people's religions. For the most part, the day-to-day decisions were made by elected officials in town and country assemblies. In the middle colonies, however, the Duke of York, George Carteret, and John Berkeley were ultimately in charge. Another reason people moved to the middle colonies was because it was a good area in which to farm. The climate and soil in the middle colonies, compared to the north and south, were perfect for farming. In terms of climate, it was neither too hot nor too cold. Wheat grew well in these conditions. As a result, these middle colonies earned the name the bread basket, because they could grow a lot of wheat and supply large amounts of flour to England. You need to remember that, the bread basket. Okay. So they supplied a lot of flour to England as well as to other English colonies, particularly in the West Indies. Many mills were built in this region to grind wheat into flour. The flour was packaged and exported. Other crops such as rye, potatoes, peas, and flax also thrived. Farming became the main occupation or job. There were other occupations too. There was also a need for sailors, trappers, lumbermen, merchants, and craftsmen. Shipbuilding became an important industry too. There were also some enslaved Africans in the middle colonies, just as there were in the southern colonies. Unlike the southern colonies, people in the middle colonies used the rapidly growing population as their main source of workers, and they paid them wages. As a result, there was less dependence on slavery in the South. Builders were needed in the middle colonies too. People built houses of different styles, often reflecting the cultures of their homeland. Networks of roads, though very basic, very slowly developing. The Great Wagon Road became an important highway stretching from Pennsylvania south through Maryland, Virginia, and North Carolina. Workshops, stores, and coffee shops were opening, thanks to the English king who needed money. A vibrant new culture was emerging 3,000 miles away. Okay, so we talked about two middle colonies today, New York and New Jersey. How did the Dutch acquire Manhattan Island, which is now part of New York? 1624, Peter Minute thought he purchased the land. Were the Native Americans in agreement with its nature? Probably not. Historians kind of disagree on that. They don't really know. How did the English acquire the Dutch colony in New Netherlands? Charles II put his brother James, the Duke of York, in charge of taking the Netherlands from the Dutch. And, of course, it wasn't hard to see all the warships and go, we don't like the guy that is currently in charge, so sure, he can rule us. Yeah. Anyway, let's keep going. Aside from farming, what are some occupations in the middle colonies? Why is slavery not concentrated in the middle colonies such as the southern? Okay, talk about all of that. The reason the Dutch as well as the English wanted colonies in the New World: a new life, religious freedom, rich farmland, commercial opportunities, and fur trade. And a lot of things shaped life in the middle colonies. Fertile soil, temperature, climate, good harbors, all those things were important things when you're looking for a place to settle in a new land. And we're just going to go through all of these for you to look at, quiz yourself on. Bread basket, that's an important thing to take note. And let's look at our timeline. Okay, we're going to put New Hampshire right there. Okay, so New York and New Jersey. All right, so we added that to what we already had. So New Hampshire was last time. So New York and New Jersey in between Carolinas and New Hampshire. I just said that wrong. New York and New York. Okay, we're good. You can look at it. There you go. Look at the timeline. You're good. Here's a question for you to ask about if the English were justified in claiming all of that land. I mean, they thought they were, right? John Cabot had come there in the 1400s. Henry Hudson didn't come until the 1600s, which you learn about in the European exploration domain. Anyway, moving on. There's a word for you, dependence, which is important because we wanted independence is what we're going to be fighting for, and we'll be talking about that shortly. So, here's a good game for you to plan. What's dependent? Plants are dependent on rain? That's correct. Is a car dependent on gas? It is. A successful restaurant? Good food? That's good. Mm-hmm. An infant does not need a cheeseburger. Human beings need sleep. Yes, Mr. Bowlby probably needs to go to sleep because the only time I can get the internet to work is the middle of the night. So here we are, released to make these videos for you. So hope you are learning and getting a lot out of them and getting on the discussion board on Canvas and answering questions. And on Zoom, you may see some questions about these things we're talking about with the colonies. So pay attention and learn a lot of stuff. Okay. Have a good day, third graders. Thank you.